Welcome to chapters 8 and 9, brought to you by Domino's Breadsticks Cheesy Bread. A drink we have dubbed the Jack Kelly because it's tequila and iced tea and an assload of sugar. Just what you people need to have me eating at this point. Yeah, awesome sauce. Anyway, here we go. While the Newsies slept, others were burning the midnight oil high in the golden dome atop the world building. I love how high in the golden dome, as if he's like Lex Luthor, or like some comic book bad guy with like this axis of whatever. Cool. They included Jonathan, the chief accountant of the world, Bunsen, the editor-in-chief, and Don Seitz, the business manager. Yes, fansies, Seitz's first name is Don. I expected them to be slightly more dignified, but what do you want? They had been called together for an emergency meeting by the old man himself, Joseph Pulitzer, publisher of The World, owner of the World Building, one of the wealthiest and most powerful individuals of the day. Another wonderful history lesson from Jonathan Last. Believe me, kids, it gets better, but not really. It gets worse. A lot worse. The topic of that night's meeting was the most important topic of that or any other day. Profits. Pulitzer sat behind his imposing mahogany desk, a tall, gaunt man with a red beard and a mustache and blazing eyes. Essentially, my friend, he was a ginger. And probably the reason why wonderful people such as myself have no souls and no friends. Thank you, Joseph Pulitzer, for ruining my life. Love you much, but not really. He had born in Hungary 52 years earlier, and having a sense of adventure, had come to the United States in 1864 to fight in the Civil War. Fluent in several languages, after the war, Pulitzer became a reporter on a German-language newspaper published in St. Louis, Missouri. He worked his way up through every job on the paper until he was made editor-in-chief. Yes, this is why I fucking love / really, really hate Jonathan fucking Last. This man put random history lessons in with this story. And you don't even realize it until you're like, why am I learning about things I shouldn't even be learning about? Until after the fact. Whatever. It happens more often. In his spare time, he studied law. After a brief stint in politics, he began buying small newspapers, which he would build up, sell, and then use the profits to buy even bigger newspapers. In 1883, he decided to take on the biggest newspaper man of them all, William Randolph Hearst, and he came to New York and bought the New York World and its sister paper, The Banner. The Banner. The Banner. The Banner. By pouring money into it and stealing Hearst's best men by offering them huge raises, he tried to make the World the most successful paper in the world. Redundancy for the lose. But it wasn't so easy. Hearst was a shrewd businessman too. As soon as he caught onto the game, he used the same tactics and started hiring Pulitzer's best men for even higher salaries. The cost of the newspaper war had been high and were the cause for that night's meeting. I do not like history lessons when I'm reading really bad stories. I really don't. It makes it even worse. I fucking hate Jonathan Last. Jonathan the accountant was reading a report he'd been preparing all day. Actual income, he droned on and on, as well as projected income against actual operating costs, as well as projected operating costs, have produced a reduced marginality of profit, which in turn, Seitz, Pulitzer bellowed. What in blazes is he talking about? Says you need to make more money, Chief, Seitz responded. Of course I need to make more money, but how, you bloodless blot? How? What the fuck is a bloodless blot? Oh my god, Jonathan Fast. I have several proposals, Jonathan went on, undisturbed by the outburst. The first is to increase the paper's price. Brilliant, Pulitzer said caustically. Then Hearst undersells me and we're in the poorhouse. Not in the customer price. The price of our distribution apparatus. What is he talking about now? Pulitzer demanded of Seitz. Why can't the man learn to speak English? I did. There's like a million things wrong with that sentence. He's talking about the newsboys, Seitz said. He wants to charge them more for their papers. Pulitzer grew thoughtful. An increase of a mere 1/10% per paper, Jonathan went on, pressing his advantage. Multiplied by 40,000 papers a day, 7 days a week. The newsboys won't stand for it, Seitz said. Every one of them will head straight for Hearst. Pulitzer cleared his throat. As newspapermen, William Randolph Hearst and I would slit each other's throats. But as gentlemen and businessmen, I believe that we can come to an agreement on this matter. You mean you think you can get Hearst to charge his Newsies a 10% more too? Hearst and every other newspaper publisher in the city, Pulitzer said. Gentlemen, we have a busy night ahead of us. Chapter 9, in which the Newsies go on strike and Rebecca burps while reading. Good fucking read right here. Oh, there is a lot of tequila in that Jack Kelly. Oh! David and Les had been waiting for nearly an hour in front of the World building when Jack strode up, a big grin on his face. You're late, David snapped. Don't be mad. It's a beautiful day. And take a look at that headline.
Don't be mad at your boyfriend, David.
Yeah, don't be mad at your boyfriend, David. He just got laid. He pointed to the huge chalkboards where the men had written bloody beatings and trolley strike, 3 exclamation points. Headlines don't sell papers. Newsies, David said peevishly. Newsies sell papers. It's all your fault, Jack went on, unperturbed. If I had eaten so much last night, I wouldn't have snoozed so late this morning. Let's get the papers and get to work, David said. They grew puzzled as they approached the loading dock. Mush, Crutchy, Racetrack Specs, and the other Newsies were crowding around the counter, waving their arms and shouting at Weisel. They don't even say Weasel here. Can I just call him Weasel from now on, please? Thank you. Jack pushed his way through with David and Les close behind him. What's going on here? Jack demanded. They raised the price, Racetrack said. 10 cents a hundred, Mush said. I can eat for 2 days on 10 cents. This'll bust me, Crutchy said, almost in tears. I can barely pay for my room now.
That was Skittery's
line. Fucking Crutchy stole Skittery's line.
I'm upset about that.
I'm gonna see about this, Jack said, elbowing his way to the front of the line. Weasel raised an eyebrow. How many papers you want, cowboy? 100 papers, Jack said. And 100 for my business partners, David and Les. 200? That'll be $1.20. $1.20? Jack looked like he had just been struck. That's 60 a 100. I ain't paying no 60 for 100. Then move out of the way. You bet I'll move. I'll move straight over to the Journal. It's the same as the Journal, Racetrack said. Yeah, we checked it out, Mush said. There's a lot of said. What about replied, commented, remarked, answered? What the fuck? It's the same everywhere. All them big newspaper publishers got together and fixed the price. They got us by the noses and not by the balls. If you ain't buying papers, Weasel said, move out. Everybody was watching Jack, waiting to see what he would do. Finally, Jack raised his arms and shouted to them all, come on! He led the Newsies out of the courtyard and into Newsies Square, which doesn't exist because it's City Hall Park. The pigeons perched on Horace Greeley's head gazed down at them in curiosity. The Newsies were talking all at once, Kid Blink cursing at Pulitzer, Racetrack talking about his bad luck, Mush whining about how they didn't have a choice and they should go get papers while they could before somebody else took their job. Mush, stop being a crybaby! Fuck you, crybaby.
What are you doing, Jack? It's me, Mush.
He's never this much of a whining. Mush does not whine. No, not allowed. Jack stood there listening to them and getting more and more disgusted. Finally, he waved his arms and shouted, shut your yaps, all of you. We ain't going to pay 60 a 100, and nobody's going to take away our jobs. We just won't let nobody come through them gates. He pointed to the big iron gates that surrounded the loading dock till they put the price back where it was. You're talking about a strike, David said. The word hung in the still morning air. Strike. Strike. The sound of it sent shivers down David's spine. Jack turned around and looked at him like he'd just solved a difficult puzzle. Yeah, a strike. That's exactly what I mean. Nice going, Davy. It's a good thing one of us has some brains. No, hold on, David said quickly. I didn't mean that we should have a strike. We can't. We're not a union. There's not enough of us. Even if we got every newsie in New York. Yeah, we'll get every newsie in New York. That's the ticket. No, I didn't mean... Jack, be reasonable. Remember what happened to those trolley workers? Another fine idea. Any newsie don't join us, we soak them just like the trolley workers done. We can't behave like hoodlums, David protested. But nobody was listening. They were too busy cheering Jack. They relished the idea of themselves, poor and powerless, bringing the great publisher Pulitzer to his knees. Bow chicka wah wah. Although they were poorly educated, they had attended enough Sunday school to know the story of little David and mighty Goliath.
Who attended enough Sunday school?
Apparently the Newsies attended enough Sunday school.
Really?
According to Jonathan fucking Last, they do. Listen to me, David shouted, climbing up on the base of the statue so the others could hear and see him. The pigeons moved away in a flock and settled in the eaves of the building to observe. We can't just rush into this. A strike is a dangerous thing. People lose their jobs. They get hurt. Sometimes they get killed. My business partner is right. As usual, Jack said, climbing up next to David and throwing an arm around his shoulder. Like so. Business partners, indeed. We've got to think this through. It's going to be like a war. Pulitzer and Hearst and all the other rich geezers against us, a bunch of street rats. Let me tell you, it won't be easy. They're smart and they're ruthless and they own the city. What have we got? No brains. Just our brains and our guts and the shirts on our backs. The choice is up to you. What do? Pay the extra 10 pennies or strike? Kid Blink, who hasn't been mentioned much in this novel, Boots, Much, Crutchy, and the rest of them looked away. They kicked at the clods of earth and muttered among themselves. None of them seemed to want to say the word. David was thinking about the trolley workers, all beaten and bloody. He thought about the Delancey brothers and the queer, cruel way they smiled when they caught a newsie and hurt him. He couldn't say the word either. None of them had to, it turned out, because somebody else did. A small figure stepped forward, raised his small fist, and shouted it loud and clear. Strike! Les had spoken for them all. They lifted him to their shoulders in appreciation of his courage and carried him around the squares, cheering. That little fool doesn't know what he's getting us into, David thought, but at the same time he felt jealous of him and even a little proud. And now we have another history lesson from Jonathan Lasts. The turn of the century was a time of more strikes than just the trolley car workers. Greedy and ruthless bosses tried to squeeze every drop of labor out of their workers in return for starvation wages. Between 1881 and 1900, more than 6 million workers staged 2,378 strikes. Most of these strikes failed. The public had little sympathy and blamed the annoying interruption of services on anarchists, socialists, or immigrants who were unfair with the American way. In 1877, railroad workers struck to protest a 10% cut in wages, the second such cut that year, that were already skirting the starvation level. The 1877 rail strike was forcibly settled by the National Guard. The Pullman strike of 1893 came about after George Pullman, a tycoon who made luxurious railroad cars, reduced the wages of his workers 5 times between May and December of that same year, even though the company had earned $25 million. Once again, the National Guard was called in. Not all strikes were started by labor. Steel magnate Henry Clay Frick investigated the Homestead strike of 1892 to dismantle the union his workers had formed. 8,000 National Guardsmen crushed the uprising, and yet men kept striking. Men. And boys, too. Ooh, end of chapter 9.